Throughout our day, stimuli compete for our attention. Examples include people who try to talk to you, the smells you encounter, even the clothes touching your skin. If we were to pay attention to each and every stimuli at the same time, we would certainly be overloaded with information and unable to function normally. Thankfully, our brains have mechanisms that allow us to filter information that isn't important so we can attend and be consciously aware of information that is. The topic we will be focusing today is Chapter 12, Attention and Consciousness. But first, let's briefly go over the history of pioneers who studied attention and consciousness to further our understanding of this phenomenon. William James was one of the first psychologists to touch on the psychology behind attention. At the end of the 19th century, he talks about how we as humans control the focus of our attention, are unable to attend to many things at once, and have selective attention with a limited capacity. Hermann von Helmholtz made use of covert attention in a study while watching a large screen. He learned the location that he was directing his attention to could be different from the location he was looking at. There are many phenomena in the area of attention that have been explored by psychologists, one of which is the cocktail party effect. The cocktail party effect occurs when a person is able to attend to specific stimulus with other stimuli that are competing for the attention of the perceiver. For example, having a conversation at a party and trying to maintain that conversation with one person while a whole bunch of noise is going on in the background. There are two types of information selection processes in regards to attention. They are called early and late selection. Broadbent argued for information selection early in the information processing stream. This is called early selection. The idea that a stimulus need not be completely perceptually analyzed before it can be selected for further processing or rejected as irrelevant. The opposing viewpoint is called late selection. It is the idea that attended or ignored inputs are processed equivalently by the perceptual system, reaching a stage of semantic encoding and analysis. There are many types of attention that have been studied, one of which is voluntary attention. In studies on voluntary attention, participants are asked to respond as fast as they can following the presentation of a target stimulus. Cues are used to indicate the direction in which the stimulus will be presented on a screen. The spotlight is a metaphor to describe how the brain may attend to spatial location. Because subjects are typically required to keep their eyes on central fixation spots on the viewing screen, internal or covert mechanisms must be at work. Experiments demonstrated that event-related potential methods elicited by stimuli varied as a function of the subject's attentional state. Their findings were that attention can affect auditory stimulus processing at the initial cortical stages of processing, and these effect stages of auditory analysis are latencies. Another type of attention is reflexive attention, a bottom-up stimulus-driven influence that describes the phenomenon in which a sensory event captures our attention. It is measured through the task of irrelevant flashing lights. Extraneous cueing occurs during this task of irrelevant flash of light. A flash of light is seen somewhere in the visual field and it affects the speed of responses to the subsequent task-relevant target stimuli. It was found that attention is controlled by low-level features of external stimuli and not by internal voluntary control. Inhibition of return occurs the more time that passes between the task-irrelevant cueing light flash and the target. The pattern of reaction time affected is reversed. The slowing of response is called inhibition of return. Studies on the neurophysiology of visual attention demonstrated that modulations in the visual ERPs begin as early as 70 to 90 milliseconds after stimulus onset. Occipital P1 refers to the attentional effect that is seen in an ERP component, the first major positive wave. It is only seen in manipulations of spatial attention. When a visual stimulus appears at a location to which a subject is attending, the P1 is larger in amplitude than when the same stimulus appears at the same location, but attention is focused elsewhere. In reflective studies, they found that voluntary spatial attention is enhanced by reflective attention at short cue to target interstimulus intervals. When psychologist Anne Trestman did studies on attention in visual search, she found that the time it takes to find a target among distractors is shorter and independent of the number of distractors unless it can be identified by a single feature such as color. When characteristics are shared between the distractors and the target, it takes an even longer time. This phenomenon is called conjunction search. Conjunction search occurs when the targets share many of the features with the distractors, which makes it harder to find. Whereas Waldo is an example of conjunction search because many of the features overlap with one another, and you have to pay attention to each individual character in order to see if Waldo is in the picture. Conjunction search studies suggest that similar neural mechanisms for the early selection of visual information are engaged during visual search for targets. The targets are defined by a conjunction of features among distractors that are engaged during voluntary attention in cueing and sustained attention paradigms. The two main phenomena that were present in Daniel Simmons' Monkeying Around with Gorillas in Our Midst study were satisfaction of search and inattentional blindness. Satisfaction of search occurs when people are less likely to search for additional targets once they have found their original target. And inattentional blindness is the failure to notice a fully visible but unexpected object because attention is engaged on another task, event, or object.